On her 20th anniversary, Catherine Sterling sat alone in a candlelit restaurant, 7 months pregnant, waiting for a husband who never came. While he was out celebrating with a younger woman, he had no idea that the housewife he mocked had secretly built an $800 million tech empire behind his back. What began as betrayal was about to become exposure, because the woman he thought depended on him had been preparing for this moment for years.
This is my life.
On her 20th anniversary, Catherine sat alone in an elegant restaurant. She was 7 months pregnant, waiting for a husband who stood her up. He had no idea the quiet housewife he took for granted secretly built an $800 million tech empire. Tonight, she was finished playing his game. This story is about betrayal, getting even, and making a huge comeback. Keep watching, because every turn will surprise you. The ending is something you will never guess. If you enjoy stories about justice and taking back power, please like this video, leave a comment below, share it with a friend, and subscribe for more amazing tales. Mrs. Sterling, your husband called. He is running late again. Catherine lifted her head from her phone. She saw the head waiter at Sharon looking at her with pity. His voice had a familiar tone. It was a mix of sympathy and politeness she had heard many times. Henri Dubois had worked there for 15 years. He had seen Catherine wait for Brandon at this very table countless times. "Thank you, Henri," she said. Her hand rested on her belly. The baby kicked, seeming to feel her sadness. "I will wait a little more." A sad piano song by Chopin filled the air. It felt perfect for the moment. She heard the gentle sound of glasses and the quiet talk of other couples. They were all enjoying their time together. It sounded like normal couples who appreciated one another. For them, anniversaries were special, not an excuse to work late. 20 years. The number echoed in Catherine's mind as she drank her water. In 20 years with Brandon Sterling, he had almost never been on time for their anniversary. That was not entirely correct. She did recall their 5th anniversary. Sterling Industries was just starting out then. Brandon needed her support. He also needed the secret money that always showed up to save his company. A candle flame danced on her table, lighting the empty seat. A waiter had quietly taken away the extra plate after an hour. Catherine told him to bring it back. She guessed that hope is the last thing to fade in a marriage. Her phone buzzed on the table. It was Brandon. She almost ignored the call, but 20 years of habit took over. "Catherine." His voice was harsh and annoyed. He spoke to her like a failed employee. "Listen, work came up. A big meeting with our Tokyo partners. You get it, right?" But Catherine heard something else. A woman was laughing, a sound like tiny bells. She also heard loud music, not office music. It was from a nightclub. A heavy bass beat came through the phone. Then a champagne cork popped, and the woman laughed again. "Of course, Brandon," she said calmly. She hid the deep tiredness she felt inside. After 20 years, she was a professional at hiding her emotions. "The merger is important." "Good. Do not wait for me." He ended the call. He did not say goodbye. He forgot their anniversary and did not ask about the baby. A waiter brought a dessert with a sugar swan on top. The sugar art showed two swans with their necks crossed. "This is from us, Mrs. Sterling. For your anniversary." Catherine gave a small smile, but her eyes were sad. Brandon once said they were like warm chocolate. Now they just looked exhausted. "How kind. Please give my thanks to the chef." She was sitting among happy couples. Suddenly her phone buzzed. Brandon's assistant, Jennifer, posted new photos of him. Jennifer was a young go-getter. She had no idea Catherine secretly followed her online. Catherine knew it was a bad idea to look, but she could not. It was like seeing a car crash. And their husband was hugging a young model named Scarlett Leck Rose. She started to think of him as her future ex-husband. The photo was from 15 minutes ago. They were at Eclipse, a very fancy nightclub. In the picture, Brandon's hand was very low on Scarlett's back. It was not a business-like touch. Scarlett was the opposite of Catherine in every way. She was 23, blonde, and very skinny. Dress was expensive and showed a lot of skin. Catherine took a deep, slow breath. It was a trick she learned in her yoga class. She always went to that class by herself. She looked closer at the picture. Other executives from his company were there. They were all celebrating with drinks. So this was his big Tokyo meeting. The waiter came back. "Anything else for you?" "Just the bill, thank you." Catherine said calmly, though her heart was breaking. She signed the bill using Brandon's credit card. She planned to cancel it very soon. Catherine decided to call her lawyer tomorrow. It was not his lawyer or their family lawyer. It was her own secret lawyer, one of her many secrets. Henri brought her coat, a gift from Brandon from 5 years ago. That was before his assistant bought all his gifts. "Mrs. Sterling," Henri said gently, "you deserve much better than this." Catherine looked at him, surprised by his personal comment. She recalled Henri had a daughter her age. "Thank you, Henri," she replied softly. "I think you are right." She walked out into the rain. Her driver met her with an umbrella. She decided to call Patricia Morrison first thing tomorrow. Patricia was New York's top divorce lawyer. She was an expert in cases with hidden money. Brandon believed he married a simple former secretary. He thought she should thank him for his wealth. The truth was far more complex. Rain hit the car window. She felt the baby kick inside her. "It is just us now," she whispered to her belly. "But Mommy has been ready for this for years." The coffee machine made a noise in their kitchen. It was in their $15 million home that Brandon loved to show off. Catherine was at the counter with her laptop. Brandon did not know she could read spreadsheets. The news was on, talking about tech companies. She was busy figuring out the value of her own secret company. The numbers told a story he never knew. She called it Chen Technologies, using her mother's family name. Brandon only cared that her family was not rich. Now, that company was worth $800 million. It worked with advanced technology and science. She built it all while he thought she was at lunch or the spa. The private elevator made a soft sound. Brandon came in. He wore the same suit from yesterday. He smelled like another woman's expensive perfume. She knew the scent. It was a $500 perfume. Scarlett clearly liked costly things. "Catherine," he said, looking at her, "we have to discuss our arrangement." She shut her laptop. Then she placed her hands on her stomach. The baby was still, perhaps feeling the stress. "Our arrangement? Is that what our marriage is?" Brandon looked angry. He disliked her calm voice. It made him feel like she was studying him. She had used that same voice to give him stock tips. He had ignored her ideas. But then his friends gave him the same advice. By then, she had already invested herself using secret companies. "Do not be so dramatic," he said in his boss voice. "You know this is not working for me anymore. A man in my position requires a certain kind of partner." "And what kind is that, Brandon?" Catherine asked. She watched him twist the platinum wedding ring on his finger. It was the same ring she had saved for 6 months to buy him, back when they were young and poor and supposedly in love. That was in their tiny Queens apartment when she worked as a secretary by day and a coder by night, building the company that would make them rich. While Brandon went to business school on loans she helped him get. "Someone who gets the demands of the business world," he said. His voice has that condescending tone he used for people he felt were beneath him, which was almost everyone. Someone who can handle the social life of a chief executive officer's wife. Someone who is an asset, not a burden. Catherine almost let out a laugh. He had no idea she had been the asset all along. Every major success at Sterling Industries for the last 20 years was her creation. She planned it all through smart market moves and strategic investments that Brandon just thought were lucky breaks. "We have grown apart, Catherine," he said, getting comfortable with his practice speech.
"You have to see that. You have let yourself go."
He pointed vaguely at her pregnant belly, as if their child was a mark of her failure, not a sign of their life together. "You just do not understand what it takes to protect my image. When was the last time you attended a corporate event looking like you belonged with me?" 3 weeks ago, Catherine answered calmly, "at the Sterling Industries charity gala. I wore that Oscar de la Renta dress. The one you see it made me look like I was trying too hard. I also spoke with the Japanese investors about their interest in quantum computing. Although you did introduce me as your wife who likes to read about technology on the side." Brandon's face turned red. He did not expect her to recall the details. He certainly did not expect her to repeat his own words back to him. "This is what I mean. You are passive-aggressive, Catherine. It is so tiring. I see a lot of things," she said, sipping her decaf tea. It was a special tea from Japan that cost $200 a pound. Brandon had complained about how much it cost until she lied and said it was from the grocery store. Also saw the pictures from the Eclipse Club last night. It looks like Scarlet Rose is very understanding of your position. Brandon's face went from red to white in a heartbeat. He never thought she would find out so soon. After 20 years of marriage, he had gotten lazy. He assumed Catherine was too simple, too trusting, and too dependent on him to notice what he was doing. "That is just a business relationship," he stammered. But his voice sounded weak. "Is that what we are calling it now?" Catherine said, using the same words he had used earlier. She had learned that trick in a negotiation class he thought was her book club. "How long has this business relationship been going on? 3 months? 6? Brandon paused for a moment. Catherine could see him thinking, trying to guess how much she knew and how much he could get away with lying about. Finally, his shoulders dropped a little. 8 months. The words hung between them in the silent room. 8 months. Catherine had been pregnant for 7 of those months. That meant he started cheating on her when they were supposed to be trying to have this baby. He had held her hand at the fertility doctor's office and promised they were a team. 8 months, Catherine said again, her hand moving to protect her stomach. "I understand now. This is exactly what I mean," Brandon said, his shame turning into anger. "You are passive-aggressive, Catherine. You twist every single conversation. You have let yourself go. You do not get what it takes to manage my image or to run a company like Sterling Industries. You just sit in this big apartment I pay for, living on my success, and you contribute nothing." Catherine stood up slowly, her movements careful because she was so far along in her pregnancy. At 7 months, she moved with the gentle grace of someone carrying something very precious because she was. "Maybe you are right, Brandon. Things do have to change." He blinked, shocked that she agreed with him. In 20 years of marriage, Catherine had never given in so easily, especially on something so important. Normally, she would argue back quietly but firmly. She would use logic and emotion to wear him down until he either agreed with her or left the room in anger. "Good," he said. He was suspicious but wanted to feel in charge. "I will have my lawyer call your lawyer. We can do this cleanly. The prenuptial agreement is very clear." "Yes," Catherine said, already walking to the bedroom they had shared for 2 decades. "Let us absolutely get the lawyers involved. I hear Patricia Morrison is an excellent choice." "You have already found a lawyer?" Brandon's voice trembled a little. Catherine stopped at the door but did not turn around. 8 months ago, Brandon. You just told me how long it has been." As she walked into the bedroom, Brandon stood alone in the kitchen, suddenly unsure who had really been in control of their talk. His phone buzzed. It was Scarlett, asking when the divorce would be final. She wanted to know when she could post pictures of them online and start planning her new life with his money. He smiled, trying to calm himself. Catherine was just a housewife with no money of her own. The agreement he made her sign 20 years ago would leave her with nothing. She was just a secretary, making $25,000 a year when he met her. She had no family wealth, no special fund, no one to fall back on. She needed him. Inside the bedroom, Catherine took out her secure phone, the one registered to her own company, not to Mrs. Brandon Sterling. She sent one text to David Park, her assistant at the company Brandon knew nothing about. "It is time for Project Renaissance," David replied almost instantly. "All materials are ready for the reveal. The legal team is waiting. The media is ready. Your empire is ready for your command." Catherine smiled, a real smile for the first time in months. How many women have heard those exact words from their rich husbands? She thought, while she packed her things. How many were told they were being replaced by a newer model, like an old car that was no longer useful? How many were told they contributed nothing when they were actually the secret foundation holding everything up? She took out the expensive luggage Brandon gave her for their 10th anniversary, back when he still remembered such things, and started to pack carefully chosen items. She did not pack the flashy jewelry he bought her to show off his money. She packed the important things, like documents, hard drives, and the pictures of her parents that he never once asked about. Her phone rang. The name Patricia Morrison lit up the screen. "Catherine." Patricia's voice was warm but businesslike. "David said you are ready to move forward. He asked for a divorce this morning," Catherine told her. "He also admitted to an 8-month affair. And it is on tape, I hope?" "Everything in our penthouse is recorded," Catherine said. It was a security system Brandon wanted. He just never asked who was in charge of the data. Patricia laughed. "This is why you are my favorite client. You have been preparing for this for 20 years. Most women do not plan this far ahead." "Most women trust their husbands," Catherine said, folding a simple black dress. It was the dress she wore to her father's funeral. The one, Brandon said, made her look poor. "I stopped trusting Brandon the day he made me sign that prenup without letting my own lawyer see it. That was the day I knew I had to build my own empire." Speaking of your empire, our financial council team felt now interesting in the Sterling Industries accounting books. Catherine stopped packing. "Really? Brandon has been using special algorithms to help with his stock trades. They are very advanced algorithms that seem to predict the market with amazing accuracy. They are the kind of algorithms that would require a genius who understands both the market and computer coding to create." "Imagine that," Catherine said with no emotion. "The really interesting part is that these algorithms are a perfect match for the ones registered as the property of Chen Technologies, the company you have been building for 20 years. He has been stealing from me. It was not a question. For about 10 years, he has made hundreds of millions of dollars in profit that he has passed off as his own smart business sense. Catherine, this is more than just a divorce. This is a massive case of corporate theft." Catherine sat on the bed, feeling the baby kick as she rested a hand on her stomach. "Patricia, I want you to get all the proof together, but do not file any papers yet. Let Brandon think he is in control for a little while longer. The prenuptial agreement he is so proud of has a cheating clause he probably does not remember. Cheating during a pregnancy makes the entire agreement invalid. You have known about that clause for 20 years, have not you?" "I wrote it," Catherine confessed. Brandon was so worried about protecting his future money that he did not bother to read the details about what would cancel the agreement. His lawyer was brand new and eager to make him happy. "I might have suggested some words that sounded good for Brandon but actually protected me. That is brilliant. When do you want to announce the existence of Chen Technologies?" Catherine looked around the bedroom at the designer outfits Brandon had picked for her. She saw the jewelry that was meant to show she belonged to him. It was all part of the fake life she lived while she built something real in secret. "Soon," she said. "But first, let him show everyone who he really is. Let him show off Scarlett all over town. Let him say terrible things about me to everyone. Let him believe that he is one. The taller he builds his tower of lies, the more satisfying it will be to watch it all come crashing down." The meeting room at Patterson, Morrison & Associates had the smell of leather and success. Its windows stretched from the floor to the ceiling, offering a perfect view of Central Park. The law office took up the whole 40th floor of a building older than most of Manhattan's towers. Its status came from photos of famous clients on the wall. There were senators, movie stars, and quite a few billionaires who needed help with messy divorces. Brandon sat opposite Catherine, while his lawyer, a Wall Street shark named Marcus Fitzgerald, shuffled papers like he was in a hurry. Marcus was exactly the kind of lawyer Brandon liked. He was ruthless, very expensive, and had no moral compass. The light glinted off his Rolex as he organized the file small show of money that Brandon liked. "Let's get this over with," Marcus said, speaking so fast there was no time for small talk. "My client is a very busy man. The prenup they signed 20 years ago was perfectly clear. If they divorced, Miss Sterling would only get what she had before the marriage." Patricia Morrison, Catherine's lawyer, was the opposite of Marcus. Her voice was gentle but strong underneath. Her patience was a cover for her smart thinking. She put on her simple reading glasses, which likely cost a fortune, and picked up the agreement. Patricia had been a lawyer for 30 years. She handled divorces for the wives of 3 Supreme Court justices and never lost a case about hidden money. Brandon added that Catherine brought nothing into the marriage. His phone kept buzzing with messages from Scarlett. He didn't even bother to hide them. The screen flashed with texts like, "When can we tell everyone, baby? And the Cartier bracelet is gorgeous." Catherine was just a secretary when I met her, Brandon said, his voice full of disdain. "I have been incredibly generous. The clothes, the jewelry, and the fancy life were all from me. She has lived like a princess because of my hard work." Catherine sat still, her hands resting on her pregnant belly, watching Brandon's arrogance as if he were a bug under a microscope. She had on a plain black dress, a very simple outfit that was elegant without being loud. Brandon had never understood how powerful quiet things could be. Brandon's phone started to ring. He glanced at it, then at everyone in the room. "I have to answer this. It is about the Tokyo deal." "Please do," Patricia said with a smooth voice. "We can wait." Brandon walked into the hall and his voice could be heard through the glass. "Scarlett, sweetie, I told you I am at the lawyer's office. Yes, the divorce will be done soon. Yes, you can start looking at places for the wedding." Marcus shifted in his seat. It seemed even he knew that his client's behavior was not helping his situation. When Brandon came back, Patricia had laid out several papers on the table. "Mr. Sterling, I was looking over this prenuptial agreement, and there is a very interesting part on page 18. Marcus grabbed the paper and read it quickly. He was known in all circles for how fast he could read. It was one reason he was worth his $2,000 per hour fee. "What part?" "This is a normal AL agreement from 20 years ago. It might be standard," Patricia said. Her voice a mix of polite and dangerous. "But there is a rule to cancel it in section 18R 3.2. She read from the paper. "If there is cheating during a pregnancy, which leads to ignoring marital responsibilities, the agreement is no longer valid." The room became completely quiet, except for Brandon's phone buzzing on the table. It was another text from Scarlett showing a picture of wedding gowns. "That is crazy," he shouted, his face turning bright red. "Ignoring? I am right here. I have not ignored anything." "Were you there at your 20th anniversary dinner last night?" Patricia asked calmly. "Or during the 12 doctor appointments you did not go to? Or the 3 ultrasounds you missed? Or the birthing class you said was silly because that is what doctors were paid for?" She took out a tablet and swiped through some files. "We have proof of your 8-month affair with Miss Monroe, with credit card bills showing $5,000 at Tiffany's last month and $12,000 at Bergdorf Goodman last week. There was also the private jet to Miami for a weekend when you told your wife you were in Boston for work." Marcus was now frantically looking through the documents, his usual calm demeanor gone. This is just circumstantial. "We also have hotel bills," Patricia said without changing her tone. "The penthouse suite at the Four Seasons was charged to Sterling Industries for client entertainment. I am just curious what client needed champagne, strawberries, and a massage for 2. She swiped again. "And social media posts where Miss Rose calls you her future husband starting when Mrs. Sterling was just 1 month pregnant. This one is especially good. A picture of Miss Rose with a necklace that says BS forever."
I am guessing
BS is
for Brandon Sterling, not the other thing it could mean.
Brandon's phone rang again. It was Scarlett. He rejected the call, but Catherine saw the text that followed. "Did you dump her, honey? The wedding planner needs a payment." "She gets nothing," Brandon yelled, slamming his hand on the table. Everyone but Catherine jumped. The coffee cups shook, and Marcus's fancy pen fell to the floor. "She came with nothing. She did nothing. I built my business while she stayed home and spent my cash."
Catherine had spoke for the first time since the meeting started. Her voice was steady and calm.
"We will see about that, Brandon." The quiet certainty in her voice made Brandon stop. He had heard that tone before. It was usually just before a business enemy realized he had been tricked. But this was Catherine, his quiet, obedient wife, who went to charity events and pregnancy yoga. She was the woman who had to ask his permission to buy a new car, who wanted his thoughts on every big purchase, who always let him decide everything from they should live to what they had for dinner. "What is that supposed to mean?" Brandon yelled. "It means," Patricia said, taking out another file, "that we have done some deep financial checks. Mr. Sterling, do you know that your wife received a lot of money when her father passed away 15 years ago?" Brandon started laughing. Her father was a nobody. He was an immigrant who had a tiny electronics shop. An immigrant with 14 patents for computer chip technology, Patricia corrected. Patents that he sold to Intel for $40 million. Money that Mrs. Sterling invested very cleverly. "That is not possible. I would have known about it." "Would you have?" Catherine asked softly. "When did you ever ask me about my family? Brandon, when did you ever show interest in anything that was not about your own success?" Marcus looked at the new papers, and his face got more and more pale. Brandon, we should talk. Also, Patricia added, there is the issue of stolen intellectual property. The computer programs Sterling Industry has used as 10 years, the ones that made about $300 million in profit, were created by Mrs. Sterling and are legally owned by her company. Her company? Brandon's voice was shaky. Catherine does not own a company. Patricia gave a small smile, like a chess player about to win the game. Chen Technologies was created 20 years ago, the day after your wedding. It is currently worth $800 million. The silence that came after was overpowering. Marcus, who had been clicking his pen, froze. Brand's phone, which had been buzzing nonstop, was now quiet. It was as if even Scarlett knew that something huge had just happened. You are lying, Brandon said in a whisper. Catherine got up slowly and carefully, her pregnancy making her move with grace. Brandon, I have been managing a technology empire for 20 years while you thought I was arranging dinner parties. Every big success that Sterling Industries had was because I secretly changed market situations to help you. Every smart idea you thought you had was from conversations I planned out. You have not built an empire. You have been playing with toys in a playground that I made for you. She went to the window and gazed out at Central Park. The prenup is invalid because you cheated on me while I am pregnant. Stealing intellectual property is a serious crime. You have been taking from me while being unfaithful to me. So, the point is not what I will receive in this divorce, Brandon. The point is whether I file criminal charges or just let you leave with a little bit of your pride. Brandon's phone buzzed. It was Scarlett again. Brandon, answer your phone. The wedding planner is here. He looked at his phone, then at Catherine, and then at the papers on the table that proved his wife was worth more than 10 times what he was. This is not finished, he said, but his voice sounded weak. No, Catherine said, turning back to him. It is only just starting. 3 days later, in a building Brandon did not know Catherine owned, the true story started to come out. The 40-story glass building on Madison Avenue was the home of Chen Technologies, but the name on the front was a plain Madison Business Center. Catherine had bought it 10 years ago, using a shell company. She paid in cash in a sale that was big news in real estate, but her name was never mentioned. The building itself was now worth $200 million because that is how Manhattan real estate is. Catherine got off the private elevator, and the whole mood of the place shifted. The quiet, shy housewife that Brandon knew was gone. Here, she was Meet Chen, the brilliant CEO and founder of her company. She earned respect with her intelligence, never by being a bully. Good morning, Miss Chen, her assistant, David Park, said. He sounded relieved to use her original name. David started working with her 15 years ago, right after she discovered his talent during a lecture at MIT. Miss Chen, Tokyo is waiting for your approval on the merger, another assistant said, holding a tablet. Also, Forbes is calling again. They really want to feature you in their Women in Tech issue. Tell Forbes not yet, Catherine replied. She sat down in her restaurant, custom made for pregnant executives, after realizing nothing else was comfortable. After 20 years of hiding, Catherine could finally relax in her own office. Brandon, her husband, thought this place overlooking Central Park was just for her book club. But the walls told a different story. They were covered in awards and patents, all under her maiden name, celebrating her incredible work in technology. David, she said, her computer screens lighting up. Play Brandon's last voicemail for me. Her husband's voice, thick from drinking, echoed in the room. Catherine, I am being generous by offering you the apartment. Do not push me. You know you cannot survive without my money. Just accept the deal and stop making a fool of yourself. This silly story about you owning a company is pathetic. No one believes you. David looked furious, ready to defend her. Should I write a reply? Perhaps I can send him our latest sales numbers. No, Catherine said calmly, looking at the financial reports on her screen. Let him believe whatever he wants. How is our stock performing? It is up 12% from last quarter. Your company is now worth $300 million alone. Plus, the quantum computing team just secured a defense contract. That is another $500 million over 5 years. Chen Technologies is now worth $843 million. Catherine smiled faintly. Not too bad for a secretary who did nothing. David knew her entire history. Why did you hide your success for so long? Why did you let him treat you so poorly, especially when he got so much worse? Catherine gazed at the city, feeling her baby kick. My father taught me to be patient. He came to this country from Taiwan with absolutely nothing. He turned his small repair shop into a real business. When big companies tried to steal his ideas, he fought them quietly and smartly. He won because they never saw him as a threat. She displayed an old photo of her father in his shop. Before he passed away, he told me, Catherine, find a man who loves you when you have nothing, so you know his love is real. But never actually have nothing. Always keep your own power, even if you must hide it. But I thought Brandon loved me when I was poor, Catherine said quietly. So I kept my inheritance a secret. He left me $40 million from his patents and another $20 million in insurance and investments. I told Brandon my father left me only debt. He believed it because he wanted to be my savior. She then showed a complex chart of the market from the last 20 years. Look at this. Do you see a pattern in every big success Sterling Industries has had? 3 months before each major achievement, my company made moves that set the stage for him. When he needed to enter Asian markets, I already had partners there. When he needed money, a mysterious investor always showed up with the perfect amount. You were controlling his entire career, David realized. No, I was testing him, Catherine clarified. I wanted to see if success would make him a better partner, but he only got worse. The more his company grew, the more he dismissed me. I became just an accessory to him. David pointed to another screen. Speaking of Sterling Industries, our accountants found something serious. Catherine leaned in to see the details. It was worse than she had imagined. He has been using my investment funds for his own projects. He took $2 million over the last 3 years without my permission. But that is not the worst of it, David said, showing a code comparison. The technology Sterling Industries has been using is yours. He has been selling your algorithms to other companies, claiming he created them. This is intellectual property theft worth hundreds of millions. Catherine sat back, her mind racing. This changed the entire situation. Brandon was not just unfaithful. He was a thief. Patricia needs to see this right away, she said. But David, I have another task for you. Start slowly revealing who really owns Chen Technologies. Begin with the tech blogs. I want the news to spread naturally. It will create a huge media story. When people learn I am worth $800 million while Brandon is only worth $50 million, maybe other women will see they have options, Catherine said with determination. Financial freedom after 50 is not just a fantasy. It is absolutely possible if you plan for it. David agreed, then paused. There is one more thing. We found messages between Scarlett Rose and a man named Marcus. She is not who she claims to be. Catherine's interest was piqued. Oh, her real name is Sandra Kowalski. She has a history of targeting rich, married men. She convinces them to leave their wives and then takes all their money. She has a partner who helps her. They plan to target Brandon for over a year, starting at that conference in Las Vegas. Catherine let out a hollow laugh. Of course. She was playing him from the very start. Should we tell him? David asked. Catherine thought for a moment. No. He would not believe us. He would just think I am being jealous. He needs to learn this lesson himself. But send all of this to Patricia. It could be useful. Her phone vibrated. It was a text from her friend, Margaret. I saw Brandon at the club with that young woman. She was wearing your grandmother's necklace, the one he claimed was lost. Catherine's expression hardened. Her grandmother's jade pendant, a family heirloom, was not lost. Brandon had stolen it and given it to his mistress. David, she said, her voice sharp and cold, change of plans. Speed things up. I want the board of Sterling Industries to know who owns the majority of their company by the end of this week. You own part of Sterling Industries? David asked, shocked. Catherine smiled, but it was a dangerous smile. I own 60%. I bought it through different shell companies over the years. Every time Brandon needed a bailout, I was his mysterious investor. He was always so thankful. He never once questioned where the money was coming from. She walked to the window overlooking the city. Brandon was out there somewhere, probably planning a future with Scarlett, using money he thought was his. He had no idea his whole world was about to come crashing down. "It is time for my journey of reinvention to go public," she declared. 20 years in the shadows is long enough. Let us show everyone what a so-called housewife can do when people underestimate her. Brandon was at the podium in a press room looking perfectly styled and serious. The lights were adjusted to hide his tired eyes. His expression was a carefully practiced mix of sadness and hope. "Thank you all for being here today," he started, his voice sounding important and sincere. He had a script, but he preferred to make it seem like he was speaking from the heart. Catherine watched at him on a screen in her office. David was next to her, tracking the flood of negative comments about Brandon on social media. "After 20 years together," Brandon said, "and I have simply grown apart. While I was busy building this company into a global leader, she struggled to keep up with the life of a CEO's wife." "Struggled to keep up?" David said in disbelief. "You run a company that is 10 times bigger than his." Catherine quieted him, wanting to hear all of Brandon's performance. She had known this moment was coming. Brandon S. needed to control this. Story was as reliable as his Thursday golf games. "The stress of my job, the late nights, the constant travel, it all puts a strain on a marriage," Brandon said, his voice full of fake sadness. "Catherine is a good person, but she comes from a simple life. She understood that it's the sacrifices for success at this level." A reporter named Jennifer Chen from the Wall Street Journal raised her hand. Catherine had secretly given her stories for years. "Mr. Sterling, what about the fact that your wife is 7 months pregnant?" Brandon's jaw tightened just a little. It was a sign Catherine recognized from 20 years of marriage. He was angry but was trying to hide it. "Catherine will be well taken care of based on our prenuptial agreement. I am not the bad guy here. My ex-wife did not contribute to my success. She has been living on my hard work for 20 years, and I have been very generous." Another reporter, this one from a tech magazine, spoke up. "Is it true you are already engaged to Miss Rose?" Brandon's face changed into what he thought was a humble smile. "I found a real partner in Scarlett Rose, someone who understands ambition, motivation, and the sacrifices needed for success." Scarlett then walked out from the side of the stage, and the cameras went crazy. She wore a designer dress that Catherine remembered. She had donated it to a charity last year after wearing it one time to a party Brandon had forgotten to come to. The irony was not lost on her. Scarlett held up her hand, showing a giant diamond ring that sparkled like a small sun's. "Brandon proposed last night. We are planning a wedding in the spring. Something private, with just close friends and family." "By private, she means $1 million event in the Hamptons," David mumbled. Catherine turned off the television. "He is truly digging his own grave, is he not?" "The internet is destroying him," David said, showing her his tablet. "The hashtag #OurPoorCatherine is trending. Someone found old photos of you two from when you were young, before industries. You look so happy in them." Catherine looked at the pictures, her and Brandon, in their small apartment in Queens. She's in a simple dress, and he was in jeans and a t-shirt, both smiling at the camera like they had won the lottery just by finding each other. She remembered that day. They had just gotten engaged, and Brandon had promised her the world. He had delivered on that promise, she supposed. He just had not mentioned that the world would be a prison. Later that afternoon, Catherine had her routine doctor's appointment. The waiting room was filled with pregnant women at various stages. Some were with attentive partners, as others were alone like her. She had stopped feeling embarrassed about Brandon not being there around the 4th month. As she waited, she could not help but overhear 2 nurses talking about the news. "Did you see that press conference? That poor woman, 7 months pregnant, and he shows off his new girlfriend on television. Men like him always trade up for younger models, though honestly, the wife is better off without him. Can you imagine being married to that selfish man for 20 years? Still, imagine being thrown away after 20 years. She probably has no skills and no money of her own. These society wives never do. She will get some divorce money, but it will not be enough to keep the lifestyle she has." Catherine smiled behind her magazine. It was this month's issue of a tech journal, which had an article about amazing new uses for artificial intelligence in healthcare. The writer had interviewed the mysterious founder of Chen Technologies through a secure email, never knowing they were talking to the pregnant woman sitting in the doctor's waiting room. Her phone rang. It was Patricia Morrison. "Catherine, you need to hear this. My financial experts found more than just fraud. Brandon has been using your investment formulas, the ones you developed, and selling them to competitors as his own creation. We are talking about corporate theft on a very large scale. How much? Possibly hundreds of millions in damages. Catherine, we could destroy him. Criminal charges, lawsuits, complete financial ruin." Catherine stood as the nurse called her name. "Patricia, I do not want to destroy him. I want something better. I want the truth to come out on its own. Let him dig his hole deeper. The deeper he goes, the more amazing the reveal will be. You are playing a long game." "I have been playing a long game for 20 years, Catherine replied. "I can wait a few more weeks. Besides, I want him to marry Scarlett first." "You want him to marry the con artist?" "I want him to get exactly what he thinks he wants," Catherine said. "A younger, prettier version who understands his position. Let him learn what that really means." Scarlett Rose was relaxing in a private room at a spa, with her phone pressed to her ear as she received her third facial of the week, all of it charged to Brandon's credit card. The spa worker was silent. She was used to rich clients talking, as if she was not there. "Baby, you should see this idiot," she said. Her voice, usually high and sweet with clients, dropped to its natural harsh sound with her real boyfriend. "Marcus, Brandon is easier to trick than we thought. He actually believes I am in love with him." Catherine's private detective, located in the next room with high-tech recording gear, adjusted his earpiece. Every single word was recorded with perfect clarity. "The divorce money is the real issue," Scarlett said, looking at her $40 gel manicure. "His sad little wife will not get much with the prenup, but any dollar she receives is a dollar stolen from us. Honestly, she is just so dull and plain." "I am a definite upgrade," she said with a sharp laugh. "You should have seen her last month at that charity event, 7 months pregnant, moving like a penguin, trying to look proud while everyone knew her rich ex-husband was with me. It was truly heartbreaking. All those women supporting other women pretended she was not pathetic." "How long until you can divorce him and take half?" Marcus asked through the phone. "My lawyer says 18 months minimum to make it look real. But get this, the fool already agreed to no prenup with me. Can you believe it? He makes his wife sign one, but thinks I am different. Men and their egos, I swear. He thinks because I am young and beautiful, I must really love him for himself." The spa attendant came in with Scarlett's gold-infused mask, an $800 treatment that claimed to stop aging. Scarlett was only 23 and had no aging to stop. "I have to go, baby. Remember, we need Brandon to think you are just my personal trainer for now. Once I am Mrs. Sterling and have access to everything, we can stop pretending." The financial independence after 50 group can keep their inspiring sayings. "I am getting mine at 23. She hung up and immediately called Brandon, her voice changing to sugary sweet, like flipping a switch. "Darling, I am at the spa you recommended. You are so thoughtful. Oh, I might have gone a tiny bit over budget on my shopping today. You do not mind, do you? I saw the most amazing necklace at a jewelry store. It reminded me of your eyes." Brandon's voice on the phone was indulgent. It was the tone of a man who thought he was winning. "Anything for you, sweetheart." Catherine never appreciated nice things. She once told me a necklace was just compressed carbon. Can you imagine? No sense of romance. "She sounds awful," Scarlett cooed. "How did you stand it for 20 years? I ask myself that every day. But now I have you. Someone who understands what it means to be with a successful man." Catherine received the recording 3 hours later. She listened to it while sitting in the nursery she had been decorating in soft yellows and greens. It was gender neutral, even though she knew she was having a girl. Brandon had not asked about the baby's gender. He had been too busy posting photos with Scarlett on Instagram. Photos where he looked like a middle-aged fool trying to get his youth back. "She is a professional," the investigator told Catherine over a secure phone. "This is her 4th wealthy victim. The last 3 were embarrassed to press off charges after she took their money. One of them took his own life." "Send this to Patricia," Catherine said calmly, "but do not release it yet. I want Brandon to marry her first. He needs to fully feel the consequences of his choices." "You want him to marry a con artist?" Catherine smiled, feeling the baby kick. He deserves exactly what he thinks he wants, a younger, prettier version who understands his position. Let him learn what that really means. Sometimes the best revenge is not destroying someone yourself. It is letting them destroy themselves while you watch. Later that evening, Brandon brought Scarlett to the country club. It was the same one where Catherine had been a member for 15 years, where she had served on the board for 10, and where she had quietly made connections that had helped Brandon's business deals without him knowing. Catherine was there for the monthly charity board meeting, something Brandon had forgotten about, even though she reminded him that morning by text. She wore a simple but elegant maternity dress and her grandmother's pearls. They were not the jade necklace Brandon had stolen, but the pearls he never knew about because he never asked about her grandmother. He walked in with Scarlett on his arm. Her designer dress was cut inappropriately low for the conservative place. Her laugh was too loud, and her hand gestures were too dramatic. Catherine sat with the other board members, all women over 50 who had known her for years and had watched her pretend to be less than she was for 2 decades. "Catherine, darling," Brandon said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "You belong at home resting, not desperately trying to fit in. At your age, these late nights are not good for your health." A hush fell over the room. 200 of New York's most powerful people turned to look. The club's president, Eleanor Fitzgerald, who was not related to Brandon's attorney, gasped at his rudeness. Catherine got to her feet slowly with purpose, holding the room's attention like she did in business meetings Brandon knew nothing about. As she stood, the baby kicked, offering a little boost of support. "Brandon," she began, her voice clear in the quiet room, "I have been moving in these circles for a very long time. It is amazing how little men see of what their wives really do." She stepped toward him, each movement deliberate. The other board members watched, clearly enjoying the drama. They had hoped for this. "But you are right about one thing. I should choose my friends more wisely. Some people are simply not worth my time." Whispers spread through the guests. Someone muttered, "Doesn't she own this club?" Mrs. Fitzgerald rose to her feet. "Actually, Mr. Sterling, you should know that Catherine is the owner of this country club. She has been for 15 years. She bought it with her own money and transformed it from a failing business to the top social club in this city. Every upgrade, every important member, every successful fundraiser was all her work." Brandon's face turned pale. Scarlett held his arm tighter, her sharp mind already reassessing everything. "That is impossible," Brandon stammered. "You were just a secretary." "I was working as a secretary, Brandon. There is a difference. It is like the difference between creating something great and taking the credit for what someone else did." Catherine then faced the crowd. "If you will all excuse me, I must take a conference call with Tokyo. Some of us actually have our own companies to run." She exited, leaving Brandon standing there speechless. Scarlett's nails dug into his arm as she hissed, "You told me she had nothing. You told me she was a nobody. This changes our entire plan." David Park sat in Catherine's real office, the one with a view of Central Park, not the one Brandon had dismissed as overly ambitious. He managed a team of private investigators on 3 different computer screens. Their investigation of Scarlett Rose, whose real name was Sandra Coolseshes, had exposed a scheme so clever it would have impressed Catherine if it was not so cruel.
"We have uncovered Scarlett's entire history,"
the head investigator said over a secure video chat. "She follows a pattern. She targets married men when they are most vulnerable, like during a midlife crisis or business troubles. She watches them for a long time, learning exactly what they desire in a partner, and then she becomes that person." Catherine read the reports with one hand resting on her stomach. The baby had been moving all morning, as if it could feel the stress. There were other victims. 3 were confirmed, and 2 more were suspected. A company head in Chicago lost $4 million in 18 months. A property developer in Miami lost $6 million and his business. A senator from Texas had a messy involvement, but he paid her money to stay silent. He is still in counseling. Why did they not file trial charges? They were too embarrassed. These are important men who cannot admit that a pretty woman tricked them with compliments. She is careful to make everything appear like a gift, a willing exchange of money. She keeps a record of everything to make the relationship seem real. She has love letters, pictures, and videos. She creates a story that would convince a judge. Catherine looked at the financial data for Sterling Industries. Her position on the board of a holding company still gave her access. Scarlett had already taken $2 million from Brandon in 3 weeks. At this pace, she will ruin him financially before they get married. Should we let him know? David asked, but his voice suggested he already knew her answer. Catherine thought about it, then shook her head. He made his decision. Anyway, would he believe us? He would just say we are jealous. A self-centered man like Brandon cannot believe someone could fool him the same way he fooled me. Her secure phone buzzed with a message from another board member at Sterling Industries. An emergency meeting had been called. Brandon was trying to sell company property. They needed her shares to block him. Catherine smiled. David, it is time. Release the first pieces of information about Chen Technologies. Give it to TechCrunch. They have been curious about the new company making advances in quantum computing. How much information should I give them? Just enough to make them interested. Say it is valued at over $500 million. The founder wants to stay private. They have contracts with Fortune 500 companies. Let the journalists do the work. They love a good mystery. That afternoon, Catherine went to the monthly charity lunch at the Carlisle Hotel. She was now 8 months pregnant. She walked more slowly, but still with a natural grace. She wore expensive maternity clothes that suggested quiet wealth. She wore her mother's pearl earrings, which Brandon had never liked because they were not flashy. Margaret Wilson was there and had saved a seat for Catherine. You look beautiful, she said, then lowered her voice. Unlike your soon-to-be ex-husband, who looks like he has aged 10 years in the last month. As if on cue, Brandon came in with Scarlett. He had clearly been drinking. His face was red and he was not walking straight. Scarlett held onto his arm, her eyes scanning the room like a hunter looking for an easy target. The argument happened during cocktails. Brandon, feeling bold from the whiskey and with Scar's support, went to Catherine's table. She was there with 6 other successful women, including a federal judge, a famous author, a finance manager, 2 doctors, and a university president. Ladies, he said with fake politeness before focusing on Catherine. Catherine, you look worn out. The divorce must be stressful. Guess it is hard to fight a battle you know you will lose. Actually, I have never felt better. Catherine said without looking up from her phone. She was finalizing a $40 million deal. It is surprising how much energy you have after you remove negative people from your life. Scarlett let out a practiced giggle. Brandon has been so worried about you, right, honey? All alone, trying to get by without him. It must be tough to be in your 50s with just a failed marriage to your name. Margaret scoffed into her glass. Oh yes, as Catherine is really suffering. Just yesterday, she could not decide if she should buy that tech company for $40 million or wait for the price to drop to $35. Brandon stared at Catherine. What company? You do not have $40 million. Catherine finally looked at him, her face peaceful.
You are right, Brandon. I do not have $40 million. Brandon smirked, feeling that he had won. I have $800 million, she continued in a calm voice. Give or take a few million, depending on the market, but it is close enough. The entire room went completely silent. Scarlett's champagne glass dropped from her hand, breaking on the marble floor. The sound was very loud in the sudden silence. You are lying, Brandon whispered. Catherine stood up, holding her phone. With a few quick taps, she pulled up a news story that was just published. It announced that Chen Technologies was a major new force in the tech world. The mysterious company was valued at more than $800 million. The founder's name was still a secret. She showed him the screen. That is my company, Brandon. It has been for 20 years. Every software program you used was mine. Every smart market decision was made by me. Every secret investor who saved Sterling Industries was also me. This is illegal. Brandon yelled, causing everyone to look at him. You hid your money, which is illegal in a marriage. Judge Patricia Hendricks, who was at the table next to them, turned around. Actually, Mr. Sterling, keeping assets you owned before your marriage is perfectly legal. What is against the law is to steal someone's ideas and sell them as your own.
I believe that is what you have been doing with your wife's software. Brandon's face went from red to pale. You do not know what you are talking about. I know exactly what I am talking about, the judge said calmly. I also know that your divorce hearing is in my court next week. I would advise you to hire a better lawyer than Mr. Fitzgerald. He is not ready for this. Scarlett pulled on Brandon's arm. We should go, baby. These unhappy old women are just envious. Catherine laughed, a real laugh that surprised everyone, even herself. Scarlett, or should I call you Sandra Kowalski? I am a lot of things, but I am not jealous of you. By the way, how is Marcus, your real boyfriend? Scarlett froze completely. I do not know who you are talking about. No? Then you will not care if I play these recordings for Brandon. Catherine held up her phone again, you know. The ones where you call him a fool and talk about your plan to take all his money. Those are fake, Scarlett said quickly. Too quickly. Brandon looked back and forth between them, his anger changing to confusion. What recordings? The ones from the spa this morning. Would you like to listen to them, Brandon? Would you like to hear what your partner really thinks of you? Scarlett grabbed Brandon's arm. She is lying, baby. She is just a bitter ex-wife trying to make trouble. Let us go. But Brandon was looking at Catherine now, truly seeing her for the first time in many years. She was 8 months pregnant with their child, offering him proof of her own success. Yet he chose the woman who had ruined their lives. Play them, he said, his voice low. Scarlett grabbed his arm, trying to stop him. Brandon, do not do this. But he simply pushed her away. Catherine's pressed the button. Scarlett's voice echoed in the room. Honey, this old fool is so easy to trick, she cooed. He really thinks I am in love with him. The only sound was the recording. Brandon's face as Ophelia Heard's call him all idiot and mock his need to feel young again. He heard her describe her plan to ruin him financially. When the recording ended, was already moving to the door. That is not me, she insisted. It must be artificial intelligence. It is you, Brandon said softly. That is the voice you use when you think I am not listening. Scarlett's friendly expression finally disappeared. You foolish old man. You are just another crisis with a wallet. At least your wife knew how to protect her assets. You just handed yours to me. She walked out, her footsteps echoing like sharp reports. Brandon swayed, looking completely defeated. For a second, Catherine almost pitied him. Catherine, he began. No, she cut him off. Do not say a word. You made your decision, Brandon. Now you must live with it. She walked past him, with her head held high, a hand resting on her pregnant belly. She overheard Margaret whisper, that is how a woman of class deals with a cheating husband. The Sterling Industries boardroom was incredibly tense. The emergency meeting had been called with only 2 hours' notice. Brandon walked in, full of confidence. He believed this meeting was to manage the scandal and fix his public image. He had controlled this board for 15 years, after all. These were his people.
Gentlemen, he started, ignoring the displeased looks from the 3 female board members at his greeting.
I understand the concerns about my private life, but I assure you, Mr. The chairman, Robert Blackstone, interrupted. His voice was icy. This is not about your divorce. This is about a request from the majority shareholder. Brandon laughed, a hollow, fake sound. What majority shareholder? I own 40%. The rest is split among 15 investors. It was split, Robert said. This morning, we learned several companies are owned by one person. Mr. Sterling, the main shareholder, is on the speakerphone now. The phone in the middle of the large table came to life.
Good afternoon, everyone. Brandon stood frozen. He knew that voice. He had heard it for 20 years,
asking about coffee or reminding him of meetings. But now it sounded different. It held a power he had never heard before. Catherine, he whispered. Miss Chen, actually, Catherine's voice corrected him. I have owned 60% of this company for 5 years. I bought shares whenever you needed money, but did not want to sell your own. You were so happy about those secret investors, remember? The board members looked at each other. Some had suspected something was happening, but never knew the full story. Martha Rodriguez, the finance chief, was already checking her laptop. Her eyes grew wide with every file she opened. This is not legal, Brandon yelled, hitting the table with his fist. It is insider trading and fraud. Everything was perfectly legal. Catherine's calm voice said through the speaker, I have always had very good lawyers, Brandon. For 20 years. You just never realized the bills you saw were not for a divorce attorney I could not afford. Robert spoke up. Miss Chen has requested a vote of no confidence in our current chief executive officer. You cannot do that. Brandon's face turned red, the veins in his neck bulging. I built this company from nothing with my own 2 hands. But with whose money? Catherine asked. Look at the first documents, Brandon. Page 47. That $100,000 you told everyone came from your great business sense? It was my father's life insurance. A wedding gift. Do you remember? You said we were in love and did not need any official papers. Martha showed her computer screen to the board. The proof was right there. Catherine Chen, initial investor, 3 days after their wedding. More importantly, Catherine went on, we need to talk about the secret formulas you sold to our rivals. My formulas, Brandon. The ones I created while you thought I was just a housewife. That is called corporate theft. The Federal Bureau of Investigation takes that very seriously. The FBI? His voice was shaky. Oh yes, they are quite interested in why your company's secret codes are identical to the ones owned by Chen Technologies. And my codes were registered 3 years before yours were. Robert stood. Mr. Sterling, because of this new information, I am calling for a vote. All who want to remove Brandon Sterling as Chief Executive Officer, please raise your hand. Every hand went up, but Brandon's. The motion passes. Security will take you to your office. You have 1 hour to pack your personal things. All company items must stay here. 2 security guards walked in. They looked calm but were ready for trouble. Brandon stood up, his legs trembling. Catherine, please, we can discuss this. You are having my baby. Our baby, Catherine corrected him, and she will grow up knowing her mother built a business while her father tried to take it. She will learn about being strong after 50 and about not letting anyone belittle you. This is not finished, Brandon said as the guards approached him. Actually, it is, Catherine said. By the way, Brandon, Scarlett flew out of the country today. Her boyfriend Marcus is wanted by the police in 3 states. You should probably cancel your credit cards. She spent a lot on her way out. As Brandon was led away, his phone started ringing non-stop. The news was already out. TechCrunch had a shocking headline. Sterling Industries, secretly owned by CEO's pregnant wife. The Forbes story was even tougher. From assistant to secret billionaire, the Catherine Chen story. But the Wall Street Journal article would hurt him the most. Sterling Industries stocks soars as Catherine Chen takes over. In 6 hours, the story was a global sensation. The name Catherine Chen was trending everywhere. The most popular hashtag in America was Brandon got played. Funny pictures appeared online, comparing his old press photos to headlines about his wife's success. They showed his picture with Scarlett next to her old police photo, which someone had found online. The technology websites were writing non-stop. TechCrunch posted a long article called The 20-Year Plan, how Catherine Chen built an empire while her husband claimed the credit. They found her patents in old online posts, proving her involvement. Wired magazine had a special report. We spoke to Chen Technologies' secret founder 5 years ago. It was Catherine Sterling. The article showed that Catherine had been talking to reporters for years using a different name, making correct predictions about the future of technology. Brandon was stuck in a hotel because their home was in Catherine's name. It was another painful surprise. He watched his fortune disappear on the news. The company's stock was rising, but he owned none of it. His bank accounts were frozen. Scarlett had charged $300,000 to his cards before she left. His phone would not stop ringing. At first, he was angry. Catherine, you horrible person. You ruined my life. Is this what I get for 20 years of marriage? Then he tried begging. We can solve this. Our 20 years must mean something. I know I made a mistake. Then he pleaded. Please, Catherine, I am left with nothing. The FBI is after me. My lawyers quit. I am at a Holiday Inn. A Holiday Inn, Catherine! Every message was more desperate than the one before. Catherine did not answer. She had more important things to do. She was getting ready for her daughter's birth and the public launch of Chen Technologies. The divorce hearing was on a Thursday. Judge Patricia Heiress, who was known for being tough, looked over the case files. Her eyebrows rose higher and higher. Mr. Sterling, she said, looking at Brandon. He was wearing a cheap, poorly fitting suit. All of his designer clothing had been taken as part of the investigation. Let me review the situation. You admitted to an affair for 8 months while your wife was pregnant. You also stole valuable algorithms from her company, and you moved $2 million from her accounts without permission. You also tried to conceal assets from the court. So, what exactly are you asking for? Brandon's new lawyer was a public defender. No private lawyer would work for him without payment up front. He stumbled over his words about shared property and his role in the home. Your Honor, Patricia Morrison stood up, looking perfect as usual in an outfit that cost more than Brandon now owned. My client is prepared to forget the $2 million you stole. She will not file criminal charges for the business theft, even though the FBI wants to investigate. In return, she requests full custody of your child with supervised visits. She is not asking for any financial support from Mr. Sterling. She wants no alimony, the judge asked with surprise. After a 20-year marriage? My client's net worth is $843 million at the end of today, Your Honor. She does not need Mr. Sterling's money. She never did. But she would like to say something. Catherine stood, very pregnant, but with the confidence of someone who had already won. Your Honor, would like to donate any money I might have received to the Manhattan Women's Shelter. It will fund a program for women over 50 who are leaving abusive marriages. I will call it the Phoenix for women rising from the ashes of their past lives. The judge gave a nod of respect. That is incredibly kind, Miss Chen. Mr. Sterling, you are getting a very good deal. Criminal charges could mean a long time in prison. I highly recommend you accept this offer. Brandon had no other option. His hand trembled as he signed the documents, severing the last tie to the life he once knew. Reporters crowded the courthouse steps. Catherine, with Patricia and David by her side, ignored most of them. But she stopped for Jennifer Chen of the Wall Street Journal, the journalist who asked tough questions at Brent's press event. Miss Chen, what does this victory feel like? Catherine thought for a moment. This is not about winning. It is about women helping other women through major life changes. It is about being financially independent after 50. It is about proving that life does not end when you are cast aside. Sometimes that is where it starts. What is your next step? Chen Technologies will become a public company next month. We are also starting a project to help women over 50 create their own businesses. And on a personal note, she rested a hand on her stomach. I am going to be a mother soon. Fun is more important than that. Do you have any message for your former husband? Catherine took a moment to think. I truly hope Brandon learns a lesson from this. I hope he sees that success built on another person's work is not real success. And I hope he can be a better father than he was a husband. As she drove away, she saw Brandon leaving through a side entrance to dodge the cameras. He seemed smaller, defeated. His shoulders were bent, and his confident stride was gone, replaced by the shuffle of a broken man. For a second, their eyes met through the glass. Catherine did not smile or show any triumph. She just gave a slight nod, a small acknowledgement of their shared past, and then turned her gaze forward. The delivery room was a warm welcome home, changed from the cold courtroom where her marriage officially ended 2 weeks before. Here with her chosen family, Catherine was working to bring a new person into the world. Margaret Wilson was holding one hand, and Patricia Morrison held the other. David Park was pacing nervously in the waiting area with a group of Catherine's supportive employees. The entire board of Chen Technologies had sent flower arrangements. The room resembled a flower shop. You are doing great, Dr. Sarah Chen, who was not a relative, just one more strong. Catherine pushed hard, using the same inner power that helped her hide her talents for 20 years. It was the same drive that built a secret empire and the secret spirit that endured Brandon's betrayal. Then, a new sound cut through the air. The first cry of Elizabeth Chen was strong and clear, announcing her arrival to the world. She is perfect, the nurse whispered, laying the baby on Catherine's chest. 7 pounds, 3 ounces of perfection. Catherine gazed at her daughter while tears ran down her cheeks. Elizabeth had her mother's dark, messy hair. When she opened her eyes, they were a newborn blue that could turn brown like Catherine's or stay blue like Brandon's. But what amazed Catherine was the look on her tiny face, so aware and observant, already taking in her new world. Hello, Elizabeth, Catherine said softly. Welcome. This world is very different from the one I planned for you. It is a better one, promise. Margaret came closer, her own eyes filled with tears. She is so beautiful, Catherine. She has your face. She has her own face, Catherine gently replied. She is her own person right from the start. 3 hours later, after the baby was checked and had eaten for the first time, Catherine was relaxing in her room. A familiar person appeared at the door. Brandon was there, holding a cheap bouquet of flowers with strange artificial colors, kind you buy late at night at a gas station. He looked awful. The suit he wore to court was now a mess of wrinkles. He was thinner, and his expensive clothes did not fit him right. His silver hair, usually styled perfectly, was messy. He looked all of his 58 years, and maybe even older. Can I come inside?" he asked. His voice was shaky, a tone Catherine had never heard from him. Catherine glanced at Patricia, who immediately stood. "I will be just outside," the lawyer said, giving Brandon a stern look as she left. Brandon shuffled into the room. He clutched the pathetic flowers and did not come near the bed. "She is beautiful," he said, looking at the baby sleeping in Catherine's arms. "She looks just like you." "That is what everyone is saying," Catherine answered without emotion. "Catherine, he began, but then paused, unable to find the words. "Scarlett is gone. She took everything she could and just left. She and her boyfriend were planning ticket for more than a year. The FBI told me I was lucky she did not take everything." "I am aware," Catherine said calmly. "You knew?" His face turned a little red. "You could have told me." "And would you have listened to me?" Catherine replied. "When did you ever listen to me about something important, Brandon? When I said the Tektotron deal was a mistake. When I told you to invest in different areas. When I mentioned that Scarlett seemed untrustworthy." Brandon was quiet. Then he collapsed into the visitor's chair. The chair let out a squeak. "I have lost it all.
My company, my good name, my money.
I am a consultant now." "No, that is not true. I am a junior analyst at a company that Chen Technologies happens to own. My boss is 15 years younger than me." "You have not lost it all," Catherine said, shifting Elizabeth in her arms. "You have a chance to be a father. A good father this time." "I messed up, Catherine." The words rushed out of him, sounding desperate and practiced. "You are my wife. We have 20 years of memories. We can fix our marriage. I have changed." Catherine just looked at him. She really looked at him for what felt like the first time. He looked so insignificant now, without his CEO status, his young girlfriend, and his illusion of power. This was the real Brandon, without his armor. And there was not much left. "I was never your wife, Brandon," she said in a quiet but strong voice. "I was your financial backer, your planner, your safety plan. I was the woman who made herself seem smaller so you could feel important. But I was not your wife, because a wife is a partner and an equal. She is someone whose ideas and work are respected. You never thought of me that way. I can be different." "No," Catherine cut him off. "You cannot. And more importantly, I do not want you to change. Not for my sake. I am finished trying to fix people. But Elizabeth is going to need her father, and I truly hope you can be that person for her. A better father than you were a husband." "How?" Brandon's voice was filled with emotion. "How can I be a father when I am no one now? When I do not have anything to give?" Catherine turned to Elizabeth so Brandon could see her more clearly. "You can give her your time, your focus, and your honest interest in the person she will become. You can give her everything you never gave me. That is more valuable than any amount of money. Brandon, I know this is true. I had all the money in the world, but it could not buy a real marriage." Brandon got up to go. He put the dying flowers on the nightstand, where they looked even worse next to the beautiful bouquets from Catherine's true friends. "Just so you know, I am going to testify against Scarlett. The FBI caught her at the airport. She was carrying 3 different passports." "Good," Catherine said. "Perhaps that will protect the next woman she tries to trick." Brandon stopped at the doorway. "Catherine, why did you stay for 20 years? You had all this money and power. Why did you not leave?" Catherine thought about it. She had wondered that herself so times. In the beginning, it was because of love. Then, it was because of hope. After that, it was part of a plan. "I had to make sure my own company could survive without Sterling Industries. And in the end," she looked down at Elizabeth. "In the end, it was about the right moment. Everything unfolded just as it was meant to. Had I walked out 5 years ago, or even 10, Chet's Technologies would not exist. I would be a different person, and there would be no Elizabeth." Brandon nodded slowly. finally grasping that Catherine's plan was always bigger and more intricate than he ever imagined. Without another word, he turned and left, his footsteps fading down the hospital hall. An hour later, Margaret came back with non-alcoholic champagne for Catherine. For everyone else, she brought the real celebration. Patricia proposed a toast to Catherine Chen for showing that living a great life is the ultimate victory. To Elizabeth Chen, Catherine added, who will never need to dim her own light to make someone else feel important. As they enjoyed their drinks, Catherine's phone buzzed. It was a notification. The Chisa Technology public offering was officially approved. The company's starting value was $1.2 billion. She had become a billionaire. She looked down at Elizabeth, who was starting to stir with the soft sounds a newborn makes, deciding between waking up or sleeping more. Your mama is a billionaire, she whispered softly, but what is more important is that your mama is free. The auditorium at the Javits Center was filled with 500 women. They were all entrepreneurs or women hoping to start a business. The Phoenix Fries offers for female entrepreneurs over 50 sold out in 3 days. Hundreds more were on the waiting list. Catherine stood at the podium. Elizabeth was sleeping soundly in a carrier on her chest. Her voice was much stronger now, full of confidence, and it filled the large room without a microphone. On a huge screen behind her, pictures from her journey appeared. The young secretary who married Brandon Sterling, the society wife at fundraisers, and then the shocking reveal of the tech mogul on the cover of Forbes with the headline, "The Billion-Dollar Secret." I spent 20 years hiding my talents to protect a man's ego, she started, and the entire room went still. I secretly built an $800 million empire because I believed that was what love demanded. To make yourself smaller so that another person could feel big. Heads nodded all through the crowd. There were so many women there with similar pasts, similar wounds, and similar postponed dreams. But I want to share what I learned on my journey of midlife change. Catherine went on, gently adjusting Elizabeth as the baby stirred. The only one responsible for a man's ego is that man himself. It is not our duty to make ourselves smaller to make other people feel secure. It is not our job to dull our minds, conceal our goals, or act like we are less skilled than we truly are. She clicked to the next slide, which showed a chart of Chen Technologies' growth across 20 years. I was standing with $60,000 from my father's life insurance. Today, Chen Technologies is valued at $1.2 billion. But this is not about the money. It is about what the money stands for. It means freedom, options, and the power to choose what is best for you, not what another person demands. A hand in the audience went up. Miss Chen, where did you get the strength to continue when your husband was so dismissive of you? Catherine smiled. I had a secret that kept me strong. Every time Brandon called me just a housewife, every time he claimed credit for my ideas, every time he called me his better half, but clearly thought I was the lesser half, I held on to the truth. And that truth was my strength. She moved to the next slide, which had statistics about women over 50 who start their own businesses. Financial freedom after 50 is not just a possibility, it is a powerful reality. Women in their 50s and 60s are the quickest growing group of new business owners. We have life experience, we have wisdom, and to be honest, we have no more patience for anyone's nonsense. The sound of laughter filled the room.
How many of us have shrunk ourselves to make other people feel comfortable? Catherine asked. Hundreds of hands shot up.
How many of us have downplayed our own intelligence, our goals, or our financial success just to protect someone else's ego? Even more hands went into the air. I am 52 years old, Catherine said. I have a baby daughter who is 6 months old. I am single after a 20-year marriage to a narcissistic man who replaced me with a 23-year-old scammer who then stole everything from him. And I have never felt happier or more successful. A wave of applause filled the auditorium. Today, I am announcing the first grants from the Phoenix Fund. We will distribute $10 million to women over the age of 50 who are launching business after a divorce. This is because women helping other women is not just a popular phrase. It is a powerful movement. And changing your life in your middle years is not about what you lose. It's about finally the person you were always supposed to be. She clicked to a slide that detailed the application process. We are not searching for flawless business plans. We are searching for women who were told they are too old, not marketable enough, or too stubborn to begin again. We want the women who were ignored, cast aside, and undervalued. Because those are the very women who create empires, not just in spite of their past, but because of it. When the speech ended, Catherine moved through the audience. Elizabeth was now awake, delighting everyone with her toothless smiles. Women came up to her to share their own stories, their business concepts, and their thanks. A 60-year-old woman whose ex-husband said she would never accomplish anything showed Catherine a prototype of her new invention. A 55-year-old whose husband abandoned her for his secretary shared her business plan for a new consulting agency. "You give all of us hope," a woman said with tears in her eyes. "My wealthy ex-husband swore I would be lost without him. Your story helped me see that he was the one who was wrong." As Catherine was about to leave the conference, her phone buzzed. It was a text from David. "Brandon is waiting here. He says it concerns a trust fund for Elizabeth." Catherine saw Brandon in the lobby. He looked awkward among all the confident, driven women walking by. He had put on some weight and seemed to be in better health. His suit was not a designer brand, but it was clean and it fit into Miguel well. He was carrying a folder and a little gift bag. "Brandon," Catherine said, acknowledging him. "I saw your speech on the live broadcast," he said. "You were amazing." Catherine just waited. She knew that Brand's compliments were often followed by a request. "I wanted to give this to you," he said, passing her the folder. "It is a trust fund for Elizabeth. It is not much, just $50,000. It is all the money I could save from my new job. I realize it is nothing next to what you can offer her, but I wanted to give her something real." Catherine opened the folder and looked over the papers. Funds real and set up correctly, with no way for Brandon to control the money after it was put in. "It must have taken you months to save this much." "6 months, Brandon said. "I have been living in a small studio, riding the subway, and making all my own meals. These are all things you suggested I do, but I refused to listen." He gave her the gift bag. Inside was a small, handcrafted wooden rocking horse carved with great detail. "I made this myself," he said, sounding a little bashful. "I took a class in woodworking. I thought Elizabeth should have one thing from her father that was not just purchased with money." Catherine examined the toy, genuinely amazed. In 20 years of marriage, Brandon had never built anything. He always thought that kind of work was for other people. "Thank you," she said with sincerity. "Elizabeth will cherish this." Brandon nodded and began to walk away, but then he stopped and turned back. "Catherine, about the company where I work, Chen subsidiary number 7. I think a promotion is coming, not to an executive job, but to senior analyst. My boss, who is 15 years younger, told me I am finally learning to listen instead of just talking. She said I am becoming a productive member of the team instead of always needing to be the main attraction." "That is wonderful, Brandon. That is real progress. I am also seeing a therapist. I am trying to figure out why I threw away something so real for something so fake. Why I had to feel better than others to feel good about myself. Why I did not appreciate what I had before it was gone." He took a breath. "I am not asking you to forgive me. I know I have not earned that. I just wanted to tell you that I am really trying to be a man Elizabeth will not be ashamed to call her dad." Catherine repositioned Elizabeth in her carrier, and the baby made a happy sound. "Brandon, Elizabeth will not know you as the CEO of Sterling Industries or as my former husband. She will only know you as her father. That gives you a fresh start. Do not squander it." Brandon nodded and walked off, his steps more confident than they had been in a long time. That night, Catherine went back to the same restaurant where this whole story started. It was Chez Laurent, 1 year to the day after that terrible anniversary dinner. But now she was not by herself, and she was not the one waiting. She sat at her favorite table with Elizabeth in a high chair. Margaret and Patricia were sitting across from her, and David was at the table's end. They were all celebrating the successful public offering of Chen Technologies and the creation of the Phoenix Fund. Mrs. Chen, Henri, the parent, came to the table with a genuine smile. "Your usual champagne?" "Sparkling water for me, Henri. I am still nursing. But please bring champagne for my friends. We have a lot to celebrate." As Henri left, Catherine lifted Elizabeth out of her high chair and held her. The baby let out a pure, happy laugh that only infants can make. She reached for her mother's necklace. It was a simple gold chain with a pendant that had the Chinese symbol for strength. It was a gift from her father she had never put on during her marriage because Brandon thought it looked too ethnic. To new starts, Margaret said, raising her glass. To the truth coming out, Patricia said. To empires that were built in secret and are now in the open, David added. Catherine lifted her glass of sparkling water. To every woman who was ever told she was nothing without her husband, may they all find out that they are everything all by themselves. As their glasses touched, Catherine saw a familiar face at the bar. Brandon was not drinking. He just sat with coffee and a school book. He was likely studying to get ahead in his new job. Their eyes met from across the room. He gently lifted his cup to her, then went back to his reading. Catherine looked back at her new family, her daughter, and a life that was all hers. Outside, the lights of Manhattan sparkled with fresh promise. In that city, a woman in her 50s was likely waiting for a husband who would never arrive, thinking this was her whole life. Tomorrow, that woman might read Catherine's story. She might find the Phoenix Fun's website. She might learn that being left after many years of marriage was not an end, but a new start. She might see the financial freedom after 50 is possible, that you can survive emotional abuse, and that changing your life in your middle years can be amazing. Elizabeth reached for her mother's face, tapping her cheek with a tiny hand and making a sound like "Mama." "Yes, my sweet girl," Catherine whispered, kissing her daughter's forehead. "Mama is here, and I will never hide again." The city lights twinkled like distant stars. Each light was a dream, a new chance, a new beginning. Catherine Chen hid for 20 years, built a successful company in secret, and came out of her divorce more powerful than before. Her story was special not because of the wealth. It was special because she shared it to help other women rise up from the ruins of their old lives. Some endings, Catherine told her friends, but also told herself, and all the women who needed to hear it, are just new beginnings in disguise. And sometimes the greatest victory is not about getting even. It is about being successful. It is about being free. It is about becoming the person you were always meant to be. Elizabeth clapped her hands as if she agreed. The sound filled the restaurant like applause, like a sign that the world was saying, "Yes, finally, this is right."